Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're connecting the dots between the massive geopolitical crisis happening right now in the Middle East and the sudden, very real leap in the everyday cost of your grocery delivery. If you've been wondering why your daily expenses are skyrocketing this month, well, it's not just your standard inflation. We are looking at a fundamental global reconfiguration.
Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover 1. The 2026 digital landscape. 2. The Strait of Hormuz blockade. 3. India's fuel price surge. 4. Sector contagion and remote work. And finally, 5. Accelerating the renewable transition.
All right, Part 1, the 2026 digital landscape.
Before diving into the heavy macro data, just look at where our heads are at online today, May 15th, 2026. It's wild. We're living in this totally bifurcated, split-screen reality. On one hand, people are obsessing over niche wellness trends. Like, searches for magnesium glycinate supplements are up literally 8,600% as people try to get better sleep. Plus, everyone's playing with generative AI video tools. But on the exact flip side, the massive reality quietly overshadowing all of it is global survival. The 2026 energy shock is absolutely the defining trend dictating our physical lives right now.
And honestly, the digital noise is so intense right now that even our hyper-advanced technologies seems overwhelmed. You might have seen this going viral on X or Reddit. Anthropic's Claude AI developed this weird sleep tick. The model spontaneously started instructing users to just log off, rest, and take a break, no matter what time it is. It's kind of funny, but it's also a perfect reflection of our collective exhaustion as we try to process a world that's getting more unstable by the minute.
Which brings us to Part 2, the Strait of Hormuz blockade.
So, stepping away from the internet oddities for a second, the actual engine driving this economic mess is sitting squarely in West Asia. The speed at which this escalated from a regional conflict into a global maritime stranglehold is just staggering. It kicked off on February 28th with Operation Epic Fury. Barely 2 days later, on March 2nd, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps completely closed the Strait of Hormuz. Boom! 70% of vessel traffic vanished overnight because insurance providers just yanked their war risk coverage. We had a tiny glimmer of hope in mid-April, but the blockade was firmly slammed shut again on April 18th. And that's exactly why, today, May 15th, the economic bill has finally come due at the pump.
To put this in perspective, this single maritime choke point disrupts over 20% of the world's seaborne oil and gas shipments. That's a fifth of global energy, just bottlenecked. And because 80% of those shipments are heading to Asian markets, countries like China and India, which relies on the strait for a massive 90% of its LPG imports, are taking the absolute hardest hit.
Let's look at the localized impact in Part 3, India's fuel price surge.
Today, that massive supply shock crashed directly onto Indian shores, with the first major retail fuel price hike we've seen in 4 years. The era of static pricing? Totally over. And what's really interesting is how uneven the pain is, thanks to different state-level taxes. Down in New Delhi, petrol's sitting around 97 rupees a liter. But look at Guntur. They're getting hammered with some of the highest prices in the nation, with diesel actually pushing past that deeply psychological 100 rupee mark to 100.49. Over in tech hubs like Bengaluru, petrol is cruising past 106.
Now, a 3 rupee per liter hike might sound manageable to some, but it wasn't just a random adjustment. The giant state-run oil companies like IOC, BPCL, and HPCL were hemorrhaging cash. We're talking massive under-recoveries. They were bleeding up to 1,200 crore rupees every single day just trying to absorb the insane cost of Brent crude, which shot well above $107 a barrel. Basically, they just couldn't act as a shield for the consumer anymore.
And unsurprisingly, the macroeconomic damage here is undeniable. Say goodbye to the era of 7% plus growth for a bit. Top rating agencies are aggressively downgrading India's growth trajectory. Moody's literally just cut 2026 growth down to 6%, specifically blaming subdued private consumption and sky-high energy costs. On top of that, the RBI sees inflation peaking at 5.2%, and the rupee is taking a beating, dropping below 95 against the US dollar as the national import bill swells.
Naturally, dropping this hike right after state assembly elections has triggered intense domestic outrage, and the political framing is crucial here. The opposition has strongly categorized the move as vasuli, basically extortion, arguing the delay was purely to secure votes. Quotes from leaders like Rahul Gandhi are going massively viral online right now, tapping into the sheer frustration of the working class whose daily budgets are getting completely destroyed.
But on the other hand, the ruling administration and its supporters are pushing back with a completely different narrative.
They defend their position by framing the 3 rupee hike as an act of exceptional restraint. Their data points point out that while the global market explosion caused fuel prices in some regions to jump by nearly 100%, India actually managed to limit the domestic increase to just around 3%. So we are seeing this fierce narrative battle unfold online, weighing localized economic pain against chaotic global market realities.
Now, Part 4, Sector Contagion and Remote Work.
Beyond the political tug-of-war, this fuel hike has sent an immediate, systemic shockwave across heavy industry and everyday logistics. The contagion is moving incredibly fast. Look at manufacturing. We're seeing heavy hitters in the steel sector desperately overhauling their manufacturing processes just to keep the furnaces burning amid extreme supply chain fragility. With massive shortages of LNG, companies like ArcelorMittal, Nippon Steel India are switching entirely to synthesis gas. Meanwhile, freight rates for raw materials like iron ore have skyrocketed. This isn't just a pump price issue anymore. It's a foundational industrial crisis.
And here's where it really hits home. This contagion has radically reshaped corporate culture, literally overnight. Think back to last year, when companies were fighting tooth and nail for return-to-office mandates. Today, that is flipped entirely on its head. Work from home is no longer being pitched as a nice-to-have employee benefit. Following appeals for voluntary austerity, working from home is now officially being framed as economic patriotism. You are staying home to conserve the nation's energy.
It's wild how swiftly companies and local governments have implemented these remote work policies. They're directly tying a reduced commute to saving the plummeting rupee. The Delhi government slapped a mandatory 2-day work-from-home rule on its remote-capable employees to slash official fuel use. RPG Group heavily restricted travel in favor of virtual meetings. And platforms like Shoddy.com rolled out a Wednesday WFH policy with a highly specific calculated objective, saving exactly 30,000 liters of petrol annually. It's targeted data-driven austerity.
Which leads us to our final section, Part 5, Accelerating the Renewable Transition.
So how do we get out of this? Well, this acute crisis has essentially forced India's hand, rapidly accelerating its long-term energy roadmap. They're taking what were once just climate initiatives and turning them into urgent national security mandates. To shield the transport sector from volatile global crude, the government is aggressively ramping up ethanol blending, sourcing straight from domestic farmers. They hit the E20 milestone, that's a 20% ethanol blend, in April 2026, a full 5 years ahead of the original target. Now, they're immediately pushing the national baseline to E25 and actively fast-tracking testing for E100, which is pure ethanol. They're literally trying to grow their way out of foreign oil dependence.
Simultaneously, the actual power grid is being bulletproofed by massive additions in non-fossil energy. India just crossed a huge 150 gigawatt solar capacity milestone, adding a record-breaking 44.61 gigawatts of solar power this year alone. They're slashing customs duties on solar and battery imports, basically scrambling to build a sovereign energy buffer as fast as physically possible, so the grid doesn't collapse under the weight of foreign fossil fuel volatility.
Ultimately, the data points to a pretty chilling reality. The Iran war is entering a stalemate, meaning high oil prices could persist indefinitely. So as we face a permanently fractured global energy market, we really have to ask ourselves, will this rapid pivot to domestic biofuels, massive solar expansion, and culturally mandated remote work actually be enough to survive? Can our daily innovation outpace a permanent geopolitical blockade? That is the defining question of 2026. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep a close eye on those energy grids, and I'll see you next time.